Welcome to this presentation of the Rotary Club of North Bethesda, Maryland, USA. Our club was established in 1974. We meet every Friday morning at 7:45 a.m., and we often invite guest speakers to give presentations on all kinds of interesting subjects. Please contact us through our website at nbrotary.org. And thanks for watching. Our speaker today is Bob Sonawane. Dr. Sonawane is a member of the North Bethesda Rotary Club. He worked as a toxicologist with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and at the National Center for Environmental Assessment of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C. Dr. Sonawane has over 35 years of research and management experience in toxicology and pharmacology. He will discuss prenatal exposure to toxic chemicals.
Thank you all of you for the opportunity to present. This is not a pleasant subject I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about, give an overview of the developmental disorders and birth defects, which happens both because of genetic causes as well as the environmental factors which are the risk factors for the birth defects in children all around the world. I don't know how many of you know there are about 83,000 to about 100,000 chemicals in the commerce today in the world. 83 to 100,000 chemicals, okay? Which is a large number. When I say chemicals, that includes both the drugs as well as the chemicals, agrochemicals, and all kinds of chemicals we're talking about are in one. I don't know how many of you know, only 2 laws in this country, literally 2 laws in this country, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which is the FDA works with, and the second one is the Pesticide, Fungicide, or Rodenticide Act, that's the second one, where the industry or anybody who wants to register a chemical or a drug needs an approval from the federal government. The rest of them, I'm talking about majority of them, about 60,000 plus chemicals, which are not necessarily tested for their safety. Which is kind of shocking to a lot of the general public. So in terms of the birth defects, what we call developmental toxicity, developmental defects, only 7 to 10% of the chemicals and environment are really tested for that. And the rest of them is kind of go through different processes, but I won't go into different laws that how we control some of these substances. So briefly, because I got too many slides, I just realized that. Let's go to the next slide, please. I don't know how many of you know the thalidomide. Sorry. No. Go ahead. Thyroid disaster. The thalidomide was the drug which was approved by the FDA, not approved by the FDA, which is a good news. But that was the drug which was used as a morning after sickness in women. And that one in 1950s and 60s, that drug was heavily used in Europe. And that thalidomide disaster, if you want to call it thalidomide disaster, was the biggest disaster ever happened in the history of in the world, basically. About 10,000 kids had malformations of both limbs, that is both missing legs or missing arms, and all kinds of malformations happened during that time. Now the next slide, please. Here is a lady. I had an honor to know Frances Kelley when she was working at FDA. I was also at that time working with FDA. This is a lady, a pharmacologist from both the United States and Canadian citizen, and she was a pharmacologist at FDA when I was there in 1980s, basically. And Frances Kelley is the one who said this drug is not to be proven to be safe, and that was not approved. Basically, she did not review the material. And we found out later on that even it has been tested in the rats and monkeys and several other animal species, still it did not show any effects. But she was suspicious about this. And what happened, this drug was not approved in the United States, but it was approved in the European continent. And we saw the 10,000 kids being affected by thalidomide disaster, all kinds of malformation. So I happened to be an honor to meet her and also take to India when I organized a conference on the pediatric pharmacology in India, about 200, 300 people showed up, mostly all pediatricians and those kind of people. And she was just fantastic. She received a Medal of Honor from the President Kennedy. Next slide, please. For preventing this birth defect. Next, please. Yeah. So what happened because of this particular disaster? President Kennedy then said, we need to have some research in this area and created an agency, not an agency, but the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development was created around that time because of one individual, one scientist can make a difference, not approving a drug. And he was concerned about that. So we, National Institute of Child
I think we lost the sound.
Yes, we did. Why is it jumping around so much?
I don't know. Someone is running the slides for him.
Technical difficulties.
But we
Christine,
lost yes.
We lost the sound from the room.
Yeah.
So we have to blame you, Christine, because you're the host.
Yeah. I have no idea why I am a host, however that happened.
Why they made you a host. You are so far away, but no, I think it's the microphone in the room.
Choose the one furthest away and give her the host. I don't know what's going on here.
They're seeing the right slide. We aren't.
Oh, okay.
I'm just looking
Steve,
at it.
we have-
All right. I'm looking at it now.
You're back. Okay.
How are they seeing? No, we need your thing though. They're all seeing.
We lost the sound, Steve. You're back now.
I understand.
I think we're back with Steve, but I don't think we're back on the main microphone.
No,
I
we're
saw
back on Steve.
Yeah, Steve logged on.
Okay, don't worry about it. So you will do it, the people will be able to see this slide.
Yes, they will. They're seeing this. They see this.
Hang on, I'm gonna get it here. I'm gonna reset.
You want me to go ahead now?
Go ahead.
I just
Okay,
get it.
I don't need this. Okay. So, who is affected? I don't know. These slides are not on or not. The developmental disability, which I want to talk about, the developmental disability is a very broad term. This affects all racial, ethnic, socioeconomic groups. And recent estimate in the United States is actually 1 in 6. 1 in 6 are about 17% of children aged 3 to 17 years have one or more developmental disabilities. This is a huge number, 17% of the kids. This includes autism, cerebral palsy, hearing loss, intellectual disability. It includes learning disability, ADHD, you heard it from her. Also the attention deficit hyperactivity disorders. Also the visual impairment and other developmental delays. Okay, I'm sorry. So developmental disability, I just want to, this slide is pretty huge. I mean, a lot of information here. At least 25% of the hearing loss in babies is due to the maternal infections. The infection which happens in the mother, that is 25% is related to the hearing loss, okay? And those are like the maternal infection like megalovirus, cytomegalovirus, complications of birth and head and trauma, all kinds of factors are involved when you talk about getting loss. Okay. So what is a birth defect? Okay, birth defects, the universally accepted definition of birth defects is the structural problems. That means you see the baby is born without that structural issue, anatomical issue. Okay, that's the structural effects. It includes the function. That means anything that happens to the baby after birth, that is a developmental disorders, is a part of that throughout life. It's just not happening at the newborn baby, but also throughout the life. These are developmental disabilities as a function of all kinds of developmental functions we can think of. And also the biochemical effects that may happen and intellectual development associated with, for example, lead, which is clearly associated, lead exposure during pregnancy is clearly associated with the deficient IQ levels in children. Okay. And so in general, the birth defects, 1 in every 33 babies born in this country have one or the other kind of birth defect. A very broad term, I'm talking about a very broad sense here, not just the structural that you see, and you'll see some pictures later on, not like cleft palate or fetal alcohol syndrome. Not only that, but it's all kinds of spectrum of disorders that you see. About 1 in 33 babies born in this country have some kind of effect, or developmental effects. Okay, so what are the birth defects can result in consequence of many factors. As I said, we know very little actually. Genetic factors is a major important risk factor. In addition to the environmental factors, the chemical exposure during pregnancy, drug exposure during pregnancy also can cause the birth defects. Okay, I think we all know the alcohol use during pregnancy, tobacco use during pregnancy, use of narcotics during pregnancy, and some of the prescription medicine, even they've been tested, have been known to cause birth defects in children. Okay, let's go to the next. And even the father's exposure. Like you are working in an occupational situation in some factories where you will be carrying some of that pollutants on your body, and if you are not careful, you may be also exposing your family also to some of the chemicals that you bring from the occupational exposure. Recently, the scientists from the George Washington University here, as well as University of San Francisco, found some of the beauty salons. We use a lot of different kind of products used in beauty salons are also affecting the children if the mother is exposed to, or even during the reproductive age, if the young lady is exposed to, can cause birth defects later in life. And I'm talking about some human evidence as well as some animal evidence. But I'm mostly focusing on the human evidence because animal evidence is supporting to what we see in the human evidence, okay, or human observation that you see later on. One of the major ones, as I mentioned here in this slide here, phthalates. I don't know how do you know the phthalates is plasticizers. All kinds of plasticizers that cause endocrine effects. That means your hormonal balances are screwed up by the exposure to phthalates. The petrochemical industry, as if you know, microplastics as well as the plastic that you see, the plasticizers, the phthalates are pretty dangerous. That we use every day, the plastic materials, and they leaches out from the material into your food, your water, and so on, can cause some of the subtle effects that you may not see right away, but you may see later in life. This is a long list here, and I will let you study the list. These are really peer-reviewed information by the federal agency. The hundreds of chemicals are known to cause one or the other kind of developmental effects. And when I say developmental effects, it's not only the structural part of it, but also you're talking about all kinds of biochemical effects that may be caused by the chemicals in the environment. The prenatal chemical exposure have lately lacking the developmental impacts on we have very little knowledge, as I mentioned to you, only 72% of the chemicals are really tested, and the harmful chemicals can cause most of the disease when they're present in the fetal development. And when I talk about fetal development through the embryonic stage to the late term of pregnancy, any time. I think, as you probably know, if you are a developmental biologist, you know it. Different organ systems differentiate at different time frame during pregnancy. That means, let's say you're talking neurodevelopmental effects. You're going to see in the second or third trimester of pregnancy, if you are exposed to some of the narcotics or some of the chemicals during that time, you are likely to see the effects on the CNS system or on your nervous system or the effects on the neurodevelopmental effects, which may see later in life. There are very specific time frames during the developmental period, both in the rats and mice and monkeys and compared to the humans. And there's a whole figure which can say if you are exposed to acute exposure or chronic exposure during that particular time frame, it will have effect on differentiation of those organ systems later in life. Are the children only susceptible to the chemical exposure during pregnancy or only in the womb? No. They can have an exposure during that pregnancy period, anytime during pregnancy period, but the expression of that disease or expression of that effect can occur later in life, in adulthood. It's not only the immediate effect you see, that expression can be slowly shown in the later in life, during the old age even, can have an effect, okay? Even the significant event may happen, the exposure may occur only at a certain time frame during pregnancy, and it may not show right after birth, but it may show later in life, okay? One of the biggest culprits in the environment is the pesticides. I don't know whether you know, the pesticides are designed to kill insects, or kill weeds, or kill mites, or all kinds of creatures you can think of, but they're designed to kill, their poison to start with. But they're also known to cause some of the very dangerous adverse effects. And the EPA, for example, where I used to work for several years, we have a hard time banning some of this pesticide, even they're approved. Like as of yesterday, there's another pesticide which is likely to be banned called diuron, which is a huge product all around the country, the herbicide, which is used by agriculture field for killing the weeds. And that has been shown to cause all kinds of effects, including cancer, lung cancer, and so on. The point I'm getting at, pesticide is one of the major culprits. Organophosphate pesticides or chlorinated pesticides and so on. They are also, they require all kind of testing to be done. Still, the cumulative part, that means the over a period of time from all different sources of exposure, we don't know what the residues of those pesticides on their plants or the food or agriculture products and so on. The cumulative exposure, that means it's just not a one-time measurement. You're talking about a period of measurement that you do, and you see what the total residue is and how to assess the risk of those kind of pesticides. It's not easy task. Okay? One of the pesticides which is pretty well known, paraquat, which is a popular herbicide, that has been banned now. But when you talk about this, there's a huge industry on what I call Beltway bandits in Washington, on the 16th Street. Every chemical, literally every chemical has a lobbying group in this country. Literally, I'm not kidding. You name the chemical, there is some office somewhere in Washington is lobbying against not to have restrictions on use of some of these chemicals. And paraquat is one of them. Okay, next. Neural tube defect. Neural tube defects express birth defects involving the brain, spine, and spinal cord. And there are several chemicals and several drugs which are known to cause neural tube defects. And I'll have some list of that. But neural tube defects is a serious problem. And if you look at the March of Dimes website, you probably know March of Dimes. I used to be getting a funding from March of Dimes doing research when I was at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. And the point I'm getting at, there are neural tube defects are also caused by some of the drugs. I haven't seen any chemicals yet, but at least some of the drugs, which are even both generic drugs and prescribed drugs, can cause the neural tube defects. Again, keep in mind, when I say this, I'm not blaming one on the other. What I'm saying, poison is the toxicology is basically exposure and toxic effects. That means if you don't have an exposure, you're not likely to get toxic response. So it's a dose-related phenomenon. Unless you are exposed to a certain level, unless you assess the risk of that chemical or a particular drug, then only you can say this may cause this such and such adverse effect. You just can't conclude that you're exposed to chemical XYZ or a drug XYZ, you're going to see an effect, okay? So there's a long list of chemicals and drugs which are known to cause, known means has been validated, and several of these drugs and chemicals, these are here mostly the drugs that we are talking about, are known to cause some kind of development effects, modification linked to the birth defect. And I'm not talking each and every chemical here or each and every drug here, but they are known to cause some effects in children in general. This is pretty well known. I think anybody in this field or anybody in general, alcohol use during pregnancy is absolutely normal, okay? There's no known safe level of alcohol consumption. Like, for example, there's no safe level of lead exposure during pregnancy or several drugs and chemicals. There is absolutely no information that we can say that such and such there is a threshold. That means that certain chemical can cause a certain drug at a certain dose level. There is absolutely no threshold. That means it can cause any kind of effects later in life. Let's go. And I won't go into this. I think this is a more detail about the fetal alcohol syndrome. There are different types of fetal alcohol syndromes, but I won't go into that because it's more technical at this point. What I want to get the message across from these few photographs is this is a Down syndrome baby. Okay, and I think I don't need.
What kind of baby is that?
With a Down syndrome. Down syndrome. And so that is one of the chromosomal abnormalities that can cause a Down syndrome. And when the chromosomes during the pregnancy, the fetus is exposed to, it can cause a Down syndrome. So the chemicals are genetic factors.
But the Down syndrome is at fertilization. It's not going to be during development.
No, but I'm saying the effects can occur during the pregnancy that has caused that, and it's expressed later in life.
Sorry, Bob, is that related to fetal alcohol?
No, this is not. The Down syndrome is different.
Okay.
Totally genetic.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a genetic factor.
Yeah, okay.
Let's go to the next one.
This
This is classical. I think here we have a doctor who can tell you about that. Cleft palate and cleft lip is pretty common. Not in this country, but in many countries, it's pretty common phenomenon. And reconstruction of that, when I was at Children's Hospital, one of the few doctors used to do the reconstruction of these particular palate problem. Next. This is a neural tube defects problems, okay? And this is more detailed, like more of a technical, that how this neural tube defects are caused. There are several drugs that are known to cause neural tube defects. Next. This is alcohol, basically, stop it. What I would like to see, we don't want to see, I have so many different pictures that I present to the class and details into how the mechanistically, how these things occur, both genetically as well as chemical exposure. But this is what we would like to see, the happy faces rather than dealing with this. But we want to test to compare this particular group of farming area versus the other area where heavy use of pesticide. They were opposed. They said, we don't want you to come and study anything here. So it's hard. It's not easy doing the clinical studies in that particular population. Not easy.
When you said most chemicals are not tested, how complicated is it to test a specific chemical?
There are two, both the FDA and EPA. The so-called preclinical toxicology. That means with the preclinical toxicology, you have to test the chemical for 2 years. Okay, for cancer, 2-year study, feeding studies or inhalation studies. That is the animals are exposed to for 2 years continuously, okay? And that costs about anywhere from $2 to $3 million to do the study. One species of animals, rats or mice. And the government requirement is they have to study 2 species because you cannot predict the effects in the one animal species study only. That's one. There is a developmental toxicity studies. Okay, there are about 21-day studies, there are 3 generation studies, 2 generation, 3 generation studies that is you exposed to chemicals during pregnancy, and then you look at the effects for 3 generations. Okay, which is expensive. It costs more than $1 million to do one study. Okay. Then there are all kinds of studies, immunotoxicity studies, developmental toxicity studies, neurotoxicity studies. All these are done experimentally, rats, mice, monkeys, rabbits, and so on. That's the first phase. And that's where the screening goes on with the drug company or with the chemical company, agrochemical company. They test this and they say, well, if this is not going to go forward because I see these effects already happening. Then there are clinical studies, or in case of pesticides, the field study. That means you are actually exposing the humans by spraying the pesticides in the field and trying to measure the residues of the pesticides in the different environmental media, soil, water, you name it, air, and so on. And that's the field study. In case of the pharmaceutical company, those are clinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials they do, and then you need to get approval from FDA. You're talking about developing a pharmaceutical company, a new entity of pharmaceutical now. You're talking between $80 to $200 million minimum somewhere in that range, could be close to $1 billion to get a new entity approved. New drug approval may take close to $1 billion sometime. And that's why you think why the drugs are expensive, because the industry wants to recover their money. Nothing wrong with it, because they're all profit-making companies. But in order to get this thing through the government bureaucracy, it takes time. It could be taking even 10 years some cases. You saw in the, recently the vaccine which are approved as a, emergency use. But in order to get a final approval, it may take 10 years. And you're talking about millions of dollars of investment. And so, but that's why the less number of drugs or chemicals are being tested. And the rest goes on in the market.
Well, I want to thank Bob for a very informative discussion on the.
I'm unfortunately I could show all the slides, but
I think we saw enough to make us aware of the risk of the drugs, and I guess, we all have to be aware of the benefits as well, I guess. I mean, the benefits are that there's a lot of increased production of food. I mean, so I think the pesticides have their place. But ongoing investigation to see make them better and less toxic obviously should continue to go on. In any event, with that said, we'll end this meeting today of the North Bethesda Rotary. We'll see you all again, hopefully all in person next Friday. Thank you.
thank you.